Welcome to Women's Health Unwrapped with me, Nicola Fondell, a weekly show dedicated to empowering women to unlock the secrets of true health and vitality. Join me as we unwrap what healthy living really means with great guest experts and real life stories, all to help you get clear on the power of building sustainable, healthy habits without the overwhelm and confusion you feel right now. Now, today I'm chatting with a lovely guest, Cindy Dupie, to break down the impact of menopause on your digestive system and health. Today we're diving into a part of menopause that doesn't always get the spotlight. Digestive health can also be a topic that maybe carries a little bit of embarrassment and shame. If you've ever felt yourself suddenly bloated or reacting to foods you've always eaten, or struggling with IBS-type symptoms during midlife, you are not alone, and we shouldn't feel shame for having these kinds of symptoms. The truth is, hormones don't just affect our periods, our moods, or our sleep. They also have a huge impact on how our gut works. And as you're going to hear in this conversation with Cindy, it doesn't just affect us on the inside. Depression, low mood, stress, skin problems, hair loss. The way estrogen interacts with the gut microbiome and how it plays a role in our complete digestive system, which Cindy is literally breaking down for you from mouth to the other end, is such a valuable 101 in digestive health and gut health. So please join me as I chat with Cindy, who's here to help us unpack why menopause and gut problems often go hand in hand, and most importantly, what you can do about it. So whether you're navigating bloating, new food sensitivities, or full-blown IBS, I know that this conversation is going to shine a light on what's really happening inside your body and how you can support your gut and body to feel more comfortable and energized. Hi Cindy, welcome to the podcast.
Hi Nicola, thank you so much for having me here. I'm excited to bring a little bit of my knowledge to your audience.
Yeah, I'm sure it's going to be a lot of knowledge and a lot of very important and interesting knowledge, I know for sure as well. So just to kick us off, I'd love to find out a bit about your own wellness toolkit and ask what your most impactful healthy habit is at the moment.
Oh my goodness. My most impactful healthy tool at the moment, I would say, is getting up every day and moving. I think that's probably the biggest thing, in getting to bed early enough in order to do that. But especially as I get older, I find that becomes even a bigger piece for me.
Yeah. And have you got a favorite way to move? Is that getting outside, perhaps?
I love getting outside. I love walking. And then I am a yoga girl. I am a yoga instructor, and I've been doing yoga for about 25 years. In fact, I found yoga right about my perimenopause years, and it has taken me through. And so that's kind of what I default to. I know I should be lifting weights, but it's not that doesn't come real naturally for me. So I have to push for that one. Yeah.
Yeah, well, you're looking pretty strong there. And I asked Cindy if she was getting outside because I know that she lives in a part of the world that I think many of us would be envious of and love to get outside in, because you're over in California, aren't you, Cindy?
I am. I'm in Southern California. It's been a bit warm, but yes, I love getting outside, and I've always lived in California. So sometimes I don't realize how lucky I am until I go elsewhere. So yes, I'm very grateful for that. Yeah.
Lots of palm trees, I expect.
That is so funny, because in LA, you get a lot of palm trees. I mean, Hollywood and all of that. So there are certain parts of California where we do have palm trees. And I don't realize that it's such an iconic part of California for a lot of people. Yes.
Yeah.
But there are palm trees everywhere.
And I've just come back from a holiday when we were recording this. And one of the things that I love about going to the kind of destination I went to is the palm trees. I just think there's something so... I don't know if it's because where we live, we certainly don't have those kind of trees.
No.
It just brings like a calmness and and a sense of, relaxation and beauty as well. I think there's such gorgeous trees to look at. And I imagine with regular blue skies alongside them, it's nice to be able to just appreciate them and, get outside for walks and look at them and so on.
You're right. There is a relaxing feeling with them. Yeah. I don't know what it is,
Yeah.
but there is. So yes, very lucky. Very
Fantastic. Well, I'm sure we've all now got that lovely scene in our minds of perhaps, the typical LA beachfront with the big palm trees, and we're all wishing we were there. So you make sure you enjoy
I wish
it.
I was there too. I mean, I wish I was at the beach with the palm trees too, but I'm not.
Well, hopefully we're going to have, a nice conversation that is maybe not comparable, but it makes do anyway. I can't compete with palm trees, but we're going to talk together about, as I said, a really interesting topic, because this is something that can impact so many women as their hormones start to shift. And it's not just a problem that arises in, the perimenopause, menopause stage of life. It can, of course, be troublesome for many women from, a young age, in fact, because we're talking about gut issues and digestive health and the digestive system, one of your areas of expertise. So to kick us off, just frame that up, Cindy, like what is it we are going to be talking about, and why is it so relevant, especially to that menopause season of life?
Well, like you mentioned, women can have issues with their digestive system long before perimenopause and menopause, but it does seem to ramp up during that time. And it's something that I don't think a lot of women, and I know doctors, are not really aware of, and they're not connecting the dots. So when we think about perimenopause and menopause, we're thinking about, what we see is weight gain. We think about fatigue, a hard time sleeping, night sweats, hot flashes, brain fog, aches and pains. We get a little cranky sometimes. And so we have mood ups and downs, and sex can kind of be like, no, I don't think so. And so our libido can drop, the whole vaginal area can change. We can get dryness, we can get incontinence, we can get more UTIs. All of those things I think we recognize as part of perimenopause and menopause. But we don't connect the dots with, okay, I'm getting more acid reflux. I all of a sudden got all this bloating, and all of a sudden I have food sensitivities. Or, maybe I've got more constipation, or I've got constipation for the first time, or I'm having diarrhea. What is going on here? So estrogen affects every single cell and tissue in our bodies, and that does include the digestive system. So there's a lot of different things going on as both our progesterone and our estrogen starts to go down, right? And in perimenopause, I'm going to start there because that's where we can often see a lot of these beginning signs. And progesterone starts to go down in perimenopause usually first, and that's our calming hormone. And as progesterone goes down, often what can happen is our cortisol goes up. Cortisol is our stress hormone. It causes more anxiety. That contributes to that. And it can be an issue with sleep as well. But cortisol affects our peristalsis of our digestive system. Cortisol affects the production of stomach acid, and which is really important. I'll go into that a little bit more, why it's important, what it does for us. And so with some people, when cortisol gets higher, it can make them go to the bathroom more. And when cortisol gets higher, sometimes it can, again, kind of freeze up the peristalsis. It depends on the person. So when I moved into perimenopause, which I was in perimenopause probably for a week, and I went into menopause. It seemed like that anyway. It was during a very stressful time in my life. And I went at age 43, I went from, to my periods are absolutely gone. But it was the stress, it was the cortisol, it was losing a lot of weight for me at that particular time. And my body just quit making the hormones. And I was a mess as far as my digestive system was concerned. I was bloated. I looked like I was 7 months pregnant. I was really constipated. I was miserable. And I wasn't getting any help from, the Western medicine doctors and even integrative doctors. And that's actually what made me find functional medicine. So I just kind of went aside over here, but that is what made me find functional medicine about 23 years ago. So some of the signs, I already mentioned some of the signs of digestive issues where we're going to have more food sensitivities, we can have acid reflux, we can have more bloating, but we could also have more dry skin. And I know we associate lowering estrogen with dry skin, right? Because of collagen and all of that. But there can be a component that is directly related to the digestive system. So if I could, I think it'd be kind of nice to kind of run through the digestive system and talk about what's happening in it and how the estrogen and cortisol will affect it. Does that sound good?
Yes, I really do like the sound of that, because I think with a lot of these changes and symptoms we can experience through menopause, part of the problem is not understanding why it's happening. And I think it can, that in itself is something that is a challenge. And as you said, I would say the majority right now anyway of medical professionals, probably likewise in the US as it is here in the UK, don't know this stuff. So I think the more we're armed with the right knowledge, the better. So please take us through that.
Okay. And some of the things I'm going to point out, interestingly enough, you may not experience in perimenopause, but you'll experience in the later years of menopause. Okay, some of that. And I'll try to point that out. So again, estrogen, that wonderful estradiol, that wonderful little hormone that we do love, affects even our mouth. It affects our saliva, and it can actually affect our dental health, but that's not what we're talking about here. So saliva is critical and important because that is when we first start to break down our food. It happens in our mouth, and it happens with our saliva. And then, and if that's not happening, it can be a little bit drier, it can be a little bit more difficult to move things through. And then the food travels through the esophagus, goes through this cute little sphincter. It's called the esophageal sphincter, and it opens and shuts from the stomach. And sometimes that sphincter can become relaxed. Here again, it can be predicated on a loss of estrogen. It can also be because we have excess bloating and pushes up against the stomach and can push the food up against the esophagus. So that can contribute to more of the acid reflux. All right. And then the food goes into the stomach, and we have stomach acid that's really, really important that is produced in the stomach by the parietal cells. And estrogen, again, has an influence on the health of the parietal cells. So in some people, estrogen will help to produce that stomach acid. In some people, if we have excess cortisol, right, we can produce too much stomach acid, and we can not produce enough stomach acid. It depends on the person. Okay. Either way, it's going to be tough on the person, and it's going to affect how they digest their food. So in the stomach acid is really important for a couple different reasons. One is it breaks down your protein, moving into amino acids. And then it also makes our vitamins and minerals available to us. So really important vitamins would be B12, all of our B vitamins, our minerals, our iron, our zinc, our magnesium. So if we don't have enough stomach acid, those are not going to be as readily available to us. And so we can even start having some nutrient deficiencies. Usually, again, we're not going to see the nutrient deficiencies unless someone's had this for a long time or later on in menopause. But if a woman has had problems her whole life, she may start seeing it earlier. The other thing, really important thing that stomach acid does is that it sterilizes our food. All right. So we eat bugs all the time. We just do. Our hands, bugs get into our digestive system all the time. And the stomach acid is really critical as far as killing those bugs out so we don't get them throughout our digestive tract. So that's the first part of it. And then everything goes into the small intestine. And in the small intestine, we have one cell layer thick, and that's tissue, right? And estrogen, we know, is important for collagen. We know estrogen is important for tissue integrity. And so when our estrogen starts to drop, those tight junctions in between the cells that line the small intestine can start to just tiny separate. And then we can come up with something called leaky gut, where our gut is literally leaking some of its fluid out, and some of it can be food particles. Well, our body looks at these food particles as foreign bodies, and all of a sudden we have all of these food sensitivities. We can't eat food that we used to be able to eat before, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's happening. That can be happening. Estrogen, and we're gonna circle around the small intestine for a little while, okay? But I want to make sure I get this in here. Estrogen also influences the production of serotonin. Serotonin, we know it affects our moods, it affects our brains, but it also affects the motility of our digestive system. So it can freeze things up. And most of serotonin is made in our small intestine, in our digestive system. So it goes back and forth. So again, estrogen with serotonin, a lot of people don't realize that maybe some of the depression can be that it does have an effect on our serotonin receptor sites. Okay, coming back to the small intestine, our liver is an integral part, and gallbladder are integral parts of our digestion. There is something made in our liver that I call liquid gold because it does so many fantastic things that if we're not making enough of bile, which is not a very sexy topic to talk about, right? We think of bile, we think of maybe throwing it up, but bile is wonderful. And for so many different reasons, which I'll go into, but as we begin to lose our estrogen, what can happen in some women more than others depends on genetics, actually. The estrogen is required to make an enzyme that will make bile. So we'll often see, and also keep the bile moving, we'll often see more gallbladder removals as we get older, as estrogen drops. So the functions of bile. Bile is made in the liver. It binds with our toxins, important. It binds with the metabolites or the waste. We've used up our estrogen and our progesterone. It binds with that. It takes everything to the gallbladder, stored there. And then when bile is needed, it's dumped into the small intestine at the top. And the functions of bile, okay, first of all, is again to sterilize our food. Secondly, it's required to neutralize our stomach acid. And then it's also required for proper peristalsis again. So peristalsis, okay, there is an autonomic nervous system, enteric system that squeezes everything down through the digestive tract. And if that's not working properly, we're either going to go through things really fast or we're going to get stopped up, and that's not good at all. So that helps with the peristalsis. The other thing that it does, really important, is that it breaks down and digests fat. So if we don't have enough bile, we're not going to be able to break down our fat. So what does that do? Often a woman or anybody, they eat a slightly higher fat diet or meal, and they'll have to rush to the bathroom. That means that they are not making enough bile. Okay. For some people, it's that. And for some people like me, where I have constipation issues, that peristalsis, it goes the other way for me. All right. I get stopped up. So it breaks down our fat. So we do need fat, right? And fat can also go with our skin, right? We need enough fat to make sure the tissues, there's fat in all of our cells. All right, in the cell membranes. So we need that. We need cholesterol. We need all of that. It can also play a little bit of a role in blood sugar regulation because fat will slow down the absorption of carbohydrates. So that can help there. The other thing is we have fat soluble vitamins. And if we don't have enough bile, we could be deficient in vitamin A, vitamin E, maybe even omegas, and maybe even some vitamin D. So super, super important. I'm going to go back to the direct role that estrogen has in making bile. So bile is made from cholesterol. It's made from choline, and it's also made from bile salts. So I just kind of want to say, so let's say someone's cholesterol is high, which it will go higher, right? When we're going into menopause, as we start to lose our estrogen, the backbone of estrogen, backbone of our hormones is cholesterol. So our body will raise the cholesterol in order to try to make more of these hormones. Our body wants these hormones, actually. So let's say a woman's cholesterol goes up, the doctor puts on her statin. Think 5 times before you go on a statin for many, many different reasons. And let's say that cholesterol goes down significantly. That's going to affect the bile, making of the bile. Okay. And I mentioned how estrogen plays a role in producing an enzyme that creates the bile. So we have that cholesterol, we have that choline, we have the bile salts, and there's an enzyme that brings it all together to make phosphatidylcholine, which is the backbone of the bile. If you have a gene, and you can test this through 23andMe and put it through a different one. I mean, there's a lot of different things out there, or companies out there that do DNA testing, but you don't necessarily have to do that. Okay. This is where symptoms and family history and your own history can be very, very important. And if a clinician is really good, they'll gather that information and start connecting the dots. And even though I know I have these genes, I didn't know till after the fact, and I have it homozygous, so I have both of them from both sides of the family. If I look back, my mom had her gallbladder removed, right? So that's an issue right there. I know members of my family have had, a lot of dandruff. So if our skin's dry, we're going to get more dandruff, perhaps get more rashes. And I think a lot of women who go into menopause, perimenopause don't realize that dry skin, yes, is estrogen, but it's also the loss of bile. So they've had that. I have another family member who, when he eats a meal that's fairly high in fat, he's in the bathroom like that. So I already can see in my family there's issues with bile. And for me, it's interesting that really it didn't come really shining through that I was really having a problem. I mean, it did, but then I was able to kind of fix it until probably about 10 to 12 years after I went into menopause. And what was happening is my heels were cracking and bleeding. The skin around my hands and my fingernails, I mean, I couldn't do the dishes. Oh, darn. But anyway, putting it in the water really, really bothered me. And so all this cracking was an issue. And it wasn't until I found out that I had the PMET gene and I got some supplement support that I was able to get out of that. And by the way, I was taking HRT at the time, but the type of HRT that I was taking was very low. It was old school. It was the biestrogen. It was the estriol and estradiol, but mainly estriol, and it was low dose. So that was old school, but that's what I was on. But I still needed support, and I still need support. I still do. Okay, I still have to take it. So that's kind of it, I would say. And the only other thing I want to bring up is some women might experience something called SIBO during this time too, and that's small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. And that is where bacteria has colonized in the small intestine. Most of our bacteria should be in the large intestine. And that will create a lot of discomfort, bloating, and food sensitivities as well. So that needs to be addressed. And I find in my SIBO patients, SIBO will want to come back. It's kind of a tough one. And we have to kind of find out why we have SIBO and why it's coming back. And I find that if we have low bile production, that can kind of be an underlying thing that kind of keeps on bringing it back. So we have to address it. So I think
Mm.
that's kind of it in a nutshell.
And yeah. So I was sitting there literally fascinated because without sharing my whole medical history and recent journey, digestive and gut problems have been part of my menopause symptoms, the ones I've experienced over the last couple of years, as I really felt that hit of perimenopause. And I've been fortunate enough to have some private healthcare and see a consultant here in the UK about it. But the experience, I guess, is very typical in that they certainly do not consider your age and being a perimenopausal woman and the changes that are happening with your hormones because of menopause, and the way that they explain things, and even with my knowledge and prompting, some of that was very basic, like compared to how you've just explained it there, because again, I don't want to share warts and all and so on, but I know that the thing they think anyway, because the testing is quite limited and very typical from a medical perspective, they think it's something to do with the bile. And I had no idea until you've just walked us through that digestive system breakdown in the bile piece of what was going on and how that is all interlinked. And my cholesterol has gone up. I've had it tested twice. Of course, they wanted to put me on statins straight away, and I said no. So I'm two times into that and questioning it. But yeah, I think it's what's also interesting, Cindy, is that you've touched on the symptoms of digestive problems aren't always internal. You've mentioned dandruff, the cracked heels and fingers. I've heard from women about that and didn't realise the connection with digestive health there as well. So yeah, there's lots of different symptoms this could lead to, many of which might not be initially or ever actually associated with your digestive system.
Yes. And, when it came to my cracked skin and the bleeding heels, I thought it might be thyroid, because that can be an indication of thyroid health and thyroid issues. And I did have my thyroid really tested, all the right labs for that. And so I could kind of eliminate that. And, there are, and I think this is available in the UK, there are functional tests that are really eye-opening. And if a woman can, put out the money, it's not the right way of saying that, but can afford it. That wasn't, put out, can afford it. I highly recommend it if they're having a hard time and not getting to the bottom of things. And I know Genova Labs, I think they ship to the UK. And I think you have functional practitioners in the UK.
Yeah.
And GI Map and GI Effects, it can be very good. And it does measure stomach acid. It does measure your digestive enzymes, your bile, all of that, and some of the parasites and the bacteria. And I think it can be really, really helpful sometimes to see it in black and white. I've done it long enough where symptomatically I can kind of figure it out. I mean, I love it when I don't have to guess. But I would say if someone's really having a hard time getting their symptoms and their problems resolved, then looking or trying to find someone who does a more in-depth functional test would be worth it.
Yeah, absolutely. And we've had other functional health practitioners on the podcast talking about different aspects of health. So just kind of quickly, Cindy, because we might have someone who hasn't listened to any of those previous conversations, the functional medicine approach is very different to the typical westernized healthcare approach, isn't it? Which is generally very reactive. Certainly in my little story I've just shared there, it's very one-dimensional usually. That what they're looking at is all, well, I find most of the time very isolated. They aren't looking at the whole person and the whole body, and that's what functional medicine is doing differently, isn't it?
Yes, it is. It's functional medicine practitioners, and you're going to get varying degrees, right? And how much they've embraced it. But as a whole, we understand that everything in the body works together. It's not isolated. Whereas Western medicine, we have all of these specialists, right? So everything is isolated, everything's compartmentalized.
Yeah.
And unless we understand that everything works together, it is a puzzle. That's one of the most enjoyable. My favorite thing to do is when I have a client that comes in and start putting the pieces of the puzzles together. It's fascinating how our body is.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I love that too. And I feel disappointed that we aren't able to get better support as women unless we can afford to pay privately for
Yes.
this kind of thing, because me included, I know so many women who are visiting their doctors, perhaps nurse practitioners here in the UK, with different problems. And it is, as I say, always approached, as you say, compartment by compartment. It's like, okay, you've got joint pain, let's think about the pain, but only wherever you're getting the pain. Not, well, let's look at the whole person and let's think about what else might be going on. And we here on our NHS system have, usually, I would say probably 95% at least of the time, a kind of policy where it's one problem only. So if you went in and said, I'm experiencing bloating and I'm experiencing diarrhea, and I also feel lethargic and I have these cracked fingers, they would like, which one do you want to talk about? So that's why we need to be better informed ourselves, to go, actually, I think there's a digestive problem because I've got, and we need to lead with that through our own knowledge and understanding, which hopefully this podcast is helping women
Yes.
to achieve. So you talked all of the way to the small intestine, but then of course we have the large intestine, and one of the, if you like, hot topics now in wellness is the gut microbiome, and we know that that plays such a huge role as well, and is very much linked to estrogen and what's changing in menopause. So you've mentioned constipation, that's at the end, if you like, of the digestive system and process that we have in our bodies. So yeah, just a little bit about how that fits in beyond then what's going on in the small intestine.
Really good point. And yeah, I left you hanging. So to finish it off, so yes, the microbiome is super important. And again, most of our bacteria is in the large intestine. And in order to keep the microbiome really happy, we obviously need to feed it things like fiber and vegetables and chia seeds and all of that good stuff. And a lot of women can do that, right? But the women that have digestive issues in the small intestine with the SIBO and this and that, it's really hard for them to do. But yes, we want to eat as much fiber and variety of food as we can. And then we also want to hydrate ourselves as much as we possibly can. We also want to take things like magnesium, all right, to help with relaxing ourselves, but also relaxing and not constricting too much the tissue. So we want to, and also magnesium citrate in particular will draw water into the stool and help to eliminate it because it's softer. So in the large intestine, again, we want to have a healthy microbiome, and eating foods to help with that. I just mentioned all the fiber. Fermented foods are really important. Again, if anyone has SIBO, all these things are not going to work. So we got to attend to that SIBO and repair that so that we can really pay attention to the large intestine. And I think you alluded to the fact that our microbiome is really important as far as making sure that our toxins and our estrogen is not reabsorbed again. Okay. Because if we don't have the proper microbiome, we can actually uncouple the estrogen and the toxins from our bile, and then it gets reabsorbed. And we don't want that to happen. So drinking a lot of water, eating adequate vegetables and fiber, good fiber, and then hydrating is really important. I also want to say, probiotic can be really important for a lot of people. Attending to yeast, if someone has recurring UTIs, that can be for a variety of reasons, but it also can be an overgrowth of yeast. And believe it or not, it's UTI, right? It's vaginal system, but usually it stems from yeast in the digestive system as well. If we've taken antibiotics, a lot of antibiotics, usually there's a problem in the digestive system that needs to be fixed. It needs to be reinoculated. I was going to say something else that was really important here, but I'm forgetting what it is. It might come up in a little bit. But anyway, those are basically the things that I would recommend. And here again, in the more functional stool test, it'll measure something called calcium deglutarate. And if that's, I know what I wanted to say. If that's elevated, that is telling us again that the estrogens, our hormones, and our toxins are being uncoupled from our bile, so it's going to be reabsorbed. So that's another measure on one of those tests. I wanted to say that steroids can also change our microbiome. So something to pay attention to. Steroids can do a lot of different things, but it does change our microbiome as well. So if you've had a lot of injuries, if you've taken a lot of steroids for, let's say, asthma, things like that, have had a long history, not that you can undo that, right? But you can support your body. Supporting your digestive system is ongoing, and some people need more support than others. Some women here will never have a blip with their digestive system. Lucky them.
Yeah, definitely.
Right?
Yeah. I think what's so important, I think, here as well is that recognition of the changes in our hormones can affect the gut and lead to lots of the different outcomes and symptoms and problems that we've talked about. But also the gut can affect your hormonal balance and the metabolism. It's this two-way link and connection, isn't it? Yeah. And I think this is where you kind of touched on it a couple of times when you said if someone is struggling with these kinds of problems, it can make it harder to have a healthy whole food based diet and the other lifestyle factors that can influence your gut health and digestive health. And so what would be some of the practical tips maybe you can share, to help us have a healthy gut as much as we can so that we can try to prevent or improve any of those other symptoms we might experience?
That's a great question. Because I love bile, I'm going to start there, and then I am going to talk about other things, okay? So to make more bile, okay, we can eat, and I don't think I mentioned this, we can eat foods that are high in choline, which would be eggs, egg yolks, meat, organ meats are really important there. And then we can eat bitter food because bitter stimulates not only our digestive juices, but our peristalsis and our bile. And some bitter foods would include like lemon, lemon rind, ginger, arugula, artichoke. And then you can actually take bitters and, kind of in the old days, they used to have an aperitif before they had dinner, right? And lots of times the aperitifs would have bitters in them. And I don't know if they consciously knew what they were doing, but just by drinking that aperitif, it was stimulating the stomach acids and again, getting the body ready for digestion. So getting the body ready for digestion is super important when we sit down to eat. And I think other than the foods and the bitters and all of that help with the bile, that rest and digest is really important. And I know we're busy, and I do this too. Rarely do we sit down and just take a breath and just kind of become present and even look at what you're eating and maybe taking a pause to just even recognize yourself, you as being the food in front of you. I think just taking a breath, it just causes the autonomic nervous system and the cortisol levels just to settle in. And that in itself can be super, super helpful. The other thing is to avoid genetically modified foods. And I think we have more here in the US than you guys do in the UK. I'm not sure. But the reason being is genetically modified foods, or foods which would also include wheat, unfortunately, in the US, and oats. And there's one more. They are not genetically modified, but they are sprayed with glyphosate right before harvest because it makes it easier for them to harvest. So genetically modified foods are sprayed with glyphosate. They don't die. The weeds die, but they don't because the way that they're modified. So it's the glyphosate that's the problem. And glyphosate was originally patented as an antibiotic. So when we eat foods like that have glyphosate sprayed on it, it will change our microbiome. So paying careful attention to that, trying to stay away from steroids, trying to rest, trying to build up our bile, are all things that we can do. If we in fact do have SIBO, and there is a pattern with SIBO of bloating and constipation, diarrhea, all of that, there is a specific pattern. You can test for it. I like to do it more symptomatically at this point in time. But to treat that, I think is really, really important so that your diet can become more diversified, which helps everything.
Yeah. And just before we kind of move to wrapping up, because I really want to give some tangible tips, Cindy, I just want to ask you about sugar, because that is something that can be very problematic in lots of different ways to our digestive system and metabolic health, can't it? And quite disruptive. And I'm thinking from everything you've shared, can be a big contributor to some of these problems as well.
Yes. And that's one thing that's like right here. And I forget sometimes the things that are right here. So thank you. Yes. Sugar in the meals that we eat can change our microbiome in just one meal. It's amazing. Okay. And so if we think about the other way, we can change our microbiome to the other side too. Okay. Almost as quickly, depends on how far gone it is, but we can always change it back around. So yes, sugar will, create the microbiome or the environment of the microbiome that maybe is not so good, or an overgrowth of certain types of bacteria. We can have that too. We don't want to overgrowth. Again, we want to have this symbiotic relationship amongst our bacteria. So everything in balance. What the heck does that mean? I think we begin to peel it away, and it is a little different for everybody, but there's certain, basics in having a low sugar diet, low carbohydrate diet. When I say low carbohydrate, I don't mean low carbs and vegetables and our seeds and things like that, but our pastas and our breads, all that changes the microbiome.
Yeah.
Yes. So we want to minimize it. So thank you. Yes. For bringing
No,
that
that's
up.
good. Yeah. I mean, I was asking for myself as well there. So I think, we could talk for hours on this topic because it is so complex and interesting at the same time. One of the things you shared with me, Cindy, that I know we agreed would share at the end of the episode was your guide to testing, because I can imagine, just because of what I'm already thinking and feeling from our conversation, but having the knowledge that I've got and having been through the healthcare system over the last year with my digestive problems, someone could be listening thinking, well, it's a lost cause. I'm a lost cause. What am I going to do? Because the doctors aren't great. I've already been going. I've been trying. They aren't thinking about or mentioning any of this kind of woven web of things that actually is happening in the body, and maybe feel slightly confused or deflated around what they can do to help themselves. And not everyone can afford functional medicine or testing right now, but maybe that's something for the future. It's certainly on my plate for the future to come to when I can do that. But you've got a great guide, haven't you, that could actually be right for someone to review and take some information from, to try to get at least some of the testing through traditional medicine, that route. Just, share a little bit about that, in terms of what someone could perhaps use it for independently, if that's where they're at right now.
Well, the guide that I have that is available, and it's actually probably best available. I'm trying to think of the best way to get it. It would be through my Instagram account, because then you got the link in the bio and you can get it from there. Okay, that's probably the best way. I'm trying to think of my website. Is there something there that you can just get that? I don't think there is. So that might be the best way. And on Instagram, I'm Cindy, Cindy. What's the
underscore?
The slash underscore. Thank you. It's not slash. It's not. It's underscore, and then my last name Dupuie, Dupuie. So if you look that up and then you go to my bio, you'll see that you can download it. Okay.
I'll get the link to that, and I will put the link in the show notes. Yeah.
So that's more for blood work. Mm-hmm. Okay. For its essential blood work, lab work, which is super important for every woman and every person. It doesn't have included in it what you want to test as far as hormones in the perimenopause and menopausal time, but it covers everything else. And even though it's not covering digestion, I still think it's such a great tool that I would want every person and every woman to have as kind of a guideline. As far as digestion is concerned and what I have to offer, there's quite a few things on my blog, on my website, as far as digestion is concerned. So that might be helpful. And again, you don't have to do functional tests in order to get some help with digestion. You just need to find somebody who is knowledgeable in the area. And it might not be a doctor. It might be more of like, nutritionist or a coach like me, versus a doctor. So it's kind of reaching out and kind of searching to find that person. And, I do virtual consults. So, I am available. So I just want to put that out there too. So,
yeah. And I know when we chatted, you were explaining that you can have those virtual consultations and take a lot of information. And as you mentioned earlier, start piecing together the pieces of the puzzle and not necessarily have those test insights. So I think that could be something really, really beneficial. And I think, what I'm trying to do is help women begin to make those positive changes. And sometimes when I do coach women one-to-one, we can make lots of positive shifts to their lifestyle and improve the habits. And that's what I'm all about, is, putting those sustainable habits in place and helping you become the person you want to be. And it might be that there are still things that are troublesome, like in my own situation. I've got all of the tools in my toolkit, but I know that to tweak some of what I'm experiencing and make further improvements, I probably need to get under the hood through chatting with an expert like yourself, and alongside that, having some tests to just get better information and know what's going on. But there is a lot that you can do on your own before having to necessarily choose to do that, especially if affordability is a barrier to that, which it is for lots of women.
It is.
So just to wrap us up, I'd love to get from you, and I always ask for 3 simple steps, as simple as they can be given what we're talking about, but just 3 small steps that someone can consider and put into place themselves pretty quickly to be able to improve the way that they feel if they are experiencing these digestive or gut health problems.
Simple things. One, I think, is, I already mentioned, is that when we sit down to eat, to pause and to allow our bodies get into that rest and digest phase. That's number 1. I would say number 2, and this, Nicola, this is kind of the area that I think is so important. And I'm so focused on the physiology that what you do is so important. And helping women really get into their own bodies and honoring themselves and not fighting against themselves, I think is really important. That and getting outside, we kind of talked about that in the very beginning, as much as you possibly can, even when it's raining, even when it's cold. And as a Southern California girl, maybe that's not fair for me to say, but as much as you possibly can, and movement and breathing and diaphragmatic breath, that vagus nerve, I didn't mention that vagus nerve, which is so important with nerve innervation throughout our entire digestive system. I mean, that's expanded by the diaphragm, and calming that down is really important. So just tuning in, and if something's not working, our digestive system is so interrelated to everything else that it's really important to get it working correctly. So get help if you're not finding that you're able to do it yourself, which I would say in the beginning, some people can nail it and get it, but I would say the majority of us need a little bit of support and figuring out what really is up for us. So.
Yeah. And it is such an important area of health, because these kinds of things we've talked about can have such a negative impact in lots of ways. I think a lot of it can lead to reduced confidence and, that feeling of loss of yourself. I think, we come to that a lot with women in menopause who talk about, I just don't recognize myself. I just don't feel like me anymore. And I certainly know from, those symptoms of bloating, of change to bowel movements, of regularity of going to the toilet, lots of other things. Like I say, I don't share everything. I'm an open book, so if anyone's interested in having a chat, reach out on Instagram. But those kinds of things, especially if you've got to go out to work every day. Some women are working shifts, they're in a storefront, they're on a reception in a hotel, whatever it might be. Like, you can't just get up and go to the loo, or you're really uncomfortable. There's just so much, isn't there, that it can really impact you with when you are probably alongside that, if you are typical, experiencing other symptoms of menopause, all that,
like gas and everything else, and hot flashes and everything else.
Exactly. The mood swing. Imagine, mood swings, emotional dysregulation, and excess flatulence and bloating. Quite a difficult combination, or possibly dangerous combination. So we laugh about it, but yeah, it is a real problem. And I think it's one I'm really pleased with being able to explore in this way, because it's definitely not widely spoken about, and it is one that probably does still carry a bit of embarrassment and stigma because of some of the problems that this can result in. So I really appreciate you being here, Cindy. You mentioned Instagram. I'll pop everything into the show notes for people to connect with you. You have the YouTube channel as well, don't you? So that could be a great source of...
I do.
Yeah.
And I'm hoping to put more up there. And if I could, I know we're running out of time, a quick plug. I have an 8-week course coming up that I'm so excited about, and is for perimenopausal, menopausal women. And it is launch date, or begin date, is September 22nd. And to be able to register for that is in a couple of weeks. So, and that course is, to find out more information, is on my website. So I'm excited about that. And I go through everything during that 8 weeks. So it's a great way to be supported and to kind of find your way, what works for you.
Absolutely. So I know this episode is going to be after that, but check Cindy's out. She'll have the results by, or will be in the program possibly when you listen to this, maybe the results of the clients who've been in the program can be shared, and the next iteration of that program. So definitely check out Cindy on our socials and find out more. As you mentioned, you've got the blogs, so lots more that you can dive into. I will put a blog together from this episode as well. So if you've listened and you want to read, and I'll obviously link to some of Cindy's resources. So yeah, lots of different ways that you can dive into this topic if you think this is something that will help you with where you are right now in your menopause journey. So thank you tremendously, Cindy, for coming along and chatting about all of this and, you know, really giving us the 101 on digestive health.
Thank you, Nicola. It was a pleasure and an honor to be on your podcast. Thank you so much.
Oh, you're welcome. If this topic has resonated with you and you're curious about how to get more clarity on your own midlife health, I'd love you to take my free midlife reset quiz. In just a few minutes, it will show you where you're thriving, where you're feeling stuck, and the habits that will make the biggest difference right now. You'll find the link to the quiz in the show notes. And as always, if you found this episode helpful, please share it with a friend who might be navigating the same challenges. And of course, make sure to hit subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. And please give us a rating so that together we can change the conversation around women's health in midlife.